Good morning, Sunnyside. Welcome to our online church. Glad to have all of you with us this morning. Don't forget that anytime during the service or during the message time you'd like to chat and throw some of your thoughts into the chat box, go ahead and do that. We'd appreciate that. I'm Eric, by the way, one of the pastors here at Sunnyside, and I have the privilege of sharing the message with you this morning. And so if you have a Bible with you, I'd like for you to get it open and turn to Matthew chapter 11. We're going to be looking at some verses towards the end of that chapter here in just a few minutes. I remember a story that I've told here at Sunnyside a time or 2 years ago, but I want to tell it again. It's about when my wife and I went hiking together years ago up in the mountains, and we kind of gotten tired and we wanted to take a nap. It was a nice sunny day, so we found a log that we could lean up against with the sun shining through the trees, and it was just kind of a perfect setting for us to take a nap. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a power napper, and so I can take a 5-7 minute nap real easy, just about anywhere, anytime, and get up and be ready to go. Not so much with my wife. She doesn't necessarily like to do that, but when she does fall asleep, she falls asleep hard. And so I woke up after about 5 minutes and got up, and sure enough, she had fallen asleep. And I didn't want to bother her, so I took off to explore the area a little bit and got to see some of the countryside around there. And I came back, I think it was about 15, maybe 20 minutes later, and she is nowhere to be seen. She's gone. And so I get a little nervous, but I know she's got to be close. And so I started calling for her and looking for her, and couldn't find her. Started circling around, maybe even doing a grid off into a direction where I thought she might head, and still no dawn. Couldn't find her. And then finally, I found her in an opposite direction that I didn't think she would go, not very far from the trail where we had started in the first place, and she's just standing there. And she couldn't hear my calls for whatever reason, but as I got closer and I called for her, she said, "I'm over here." No panic, nothing. And I thought, well, what in the world is wrong? Has she lost her mind? What's going on? She's just standing there. And I get over there and I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Well, I couldn't find you." She said, "Yeah, I couldn't find the trail either. I kind of got myself lost, so I just stood here." And I said, "Really? You just stood there?" She said, and then she said this. She said, "Yeah, because I knew you'd come." And so that kind of made me feel good, but also kind of made me a little bit nervous that she could get lost so easy. But she knew I would come. You know, it's always good to know that when you can't get something done, when you can't find the answer, when you just can't get unstuck, when you can't find your way, when you're overwhelmed by the enemy, when the burden you are carrying is just too heavy, you got backup, isn't it? Someone you can call on anytime, anywhere. And I believe that I'm a blessed man because I have so many friends that I can call on at any time. And I realize what a blessing that is. And, you know, for instance, have you ever had to call somebody in the middle of the night to come and get you because your car broke down, you're out of gas? Have you ever needed some words of advice, a comforting voice just to listen to, some assurance from a friend at a most inconvenient time or place? You know, we've all been there. I know that I have. And for instance, I've inconvenienced my own wife more times than I can count because, you know, I've lost my phone, I can't find my keys. She has to come get me, and I've had to come to her rescue too, fixing a flat tire or something like that, a mechanical issue with the car, but it's never anything that causes me to get bitter or angry towards her, and she doesn't get bitter or angry towards me. Why? Because we're married. That's part of the deal, right? When I married her 38 years ago, I remember saying something like, "In good times and in bad," and as I recall, so did she. And so neither of us mind. That's part of the relationship. And as a matter of fact, it's good to know that I have someone to call on, and it's a good feeling that I know that she can call on me and I can do things for her. However, there are burdens that are a whole lot more significant than a flat tire. Burdens that make us question our abilities, our self-worth, our capacity to even keep going sometimes. And let me ask you another question. Have you been there? You know, for instance, this whole pandemic has created burdens from just being inconvenienced to anxiety for most of us. And some people, even though lost their jobs or their businesses, and in the worst case, lost their lives. You know, in times like this, we were all burdened by different things. Even preachers like me and people that are supposedly mature in the Lord and mature in their faith. But it doesn't always have to take a pandemic, because burdens are just simply a part of life. Let me tell you this, if you have no burdens, you really have no life, right? We all have burdens. Jesus told us this, that I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Notice that Jesus says you will have tribulations. It's not an option. This is not the only place that we're reminded of this. Jesus never promises a burden-free life. Remember, if you have no burdens, you have no life. You see, the problem that most of us have is not the fact that we have to carry burdens, but the problem most often is that we are carrying the wrong burdens. Have you ever seen anyone do that? Carry something they shouldn't be carrying? And don't you just want to shout or just grab them and say, "What are you doing? You don't need to do that." Where do these overwhelming burdens, these unnecessary burdens come from? Well, for one thing, they're put on us by religious and self-righteous people. And Jesus identified this problem when he described the Pharisees. Those were the Bible teachers of his day, the self-righteous Bible teachers. They were the ones who were mainly responsible for creating burdens that the people were never intended to carry. He said this about them. It's not very kind, but he says they tie up heavy burdens. These are the teachers, the religious folks. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders. But they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. In other words, he called them hypocrites. If you count them up, there's about 600 plus laws in the Old Testament. And these guys had every single one of them memorized. Matter of fact, they started memorizing the Bible at 5 years old or younger. And by the age of 10, they were expected, if they were boys, they were expected to know the entire first 5 books of the Bible by memorization. And they codified all of those laws into about 365 prohibitions, things not to do, and 250 commandments. And then on top of that, they wrote books about them, books about their books and what they meant and exactly how they should be followed, down to every little detail. And each rabbi or each teacher had their own interpretation of all these sets of rules and lists. And what it was a system of religious rhetoric. And all these rabbis, they were famous for making following God difficult. As a matter of fact, they would say something like this: the harder it was, the more right they must be. And so each rabbi had his own yoke, like those yoke that oxen would carry and pull a plow through the field. And to follow a rabbi meant to take on that rabbi's yoke or work or subject yourself to his religious system of following God, his understanding of the Bible. And the invitation was kind of like this: if you think you can handle it, then you come follow me. And what they loved to do was to pour these systems that they came up with onto other people. That's what Jesus was talking about when he said put it on their shoulders. But then they also did this. They found ways of getting out of those burdens themselves. They created excuses and such. Remember, their motto was the harder, the better. And all of this became impossible. And so by the time Jesus came on the scene, all these yokes, if you will, all these rabbis simply began to pour on guilt and shame for people. And Paul said what they have done is create nothing more than bondage, not freedom, but bondage to the law of God. And believe it or not, there are still churches and religious teachers that insist on obeying the law as they see it. And the implication in those churches and by those teachers is that if you don't do it the way we tell you to do it, you just don't measure up. And you know what that produces? The same thing, guilt and shame. Or in some cases, I guess if you really believe you are achieving it, self-righteousness, arrogancy, because you actually believe you are perfect. So many of the burdens that we carry are given to us by other people's expectations of what God wants. Not God's expectations, but what they say are God's expectations. So, secondly, there are burdens that are basically self-imposed. For instance, the burden of worry and anxiety. Do you ever worry or have anxious thoughts? Jesus said it this way: why do you do this? Remember the Sermon on the Mount? He says, don't I take care of the birds and the flowers? Why wouldn't I take care of you? In other words, why are you carrying around this burden of worry? Okay? Now, I want you to add to this list that I'm about to give you. So if you can think of things, write it there in the chat down there at the bottom right of your screen there. But there are things that we impose upon ourselves that just become burdens for us to carry. Things like failure. Okay? All right, we've made some mistakes. We've goofed up. We've done some things wrong. And those things just weigh on our shoulders. We never get past our failures. Some of you are carrying failures way back from when you were children. All right? Maybe some of your failures are a lot more fresh than that. Maybe there's something last week that's keeping you up at night. Maybe it's something that happened a couple of years ago. But failure is a burden that is self-imposed. Injustices. Injustices are things that happen to us, things that happen to others that, we take on their burdens because that shouldn't have happened to them. It shouldn't have happened to me either. And I carry that because I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to get it off my shoulders. Another burden that we, especially here in the West, take on is possessions. We have a lot of stuff, And you know what? The more stuff you have, the more burdens you have because you got to take care of it, okay? You got to do stuff with it, all right? So your possessions become just another burden. Another burden that all of us are going to experience at some point in life is loss. You may lose a loved one, lose a friend. You may lose your job. You may lose relationships. And loss is a heavy burden to bear. It's a heavy burden to carry. And here in this time in which we live, we carry the world's problems with us because every morning when we get up, we have this little thing on our smartphone called a news feed. And we can look at bad things happening everywhere. I mean, how many of those news feeds are all about good news? There's a couple out there, but not very many of them. And we take on the burden of the world, basically. Problems and pandemics all over the world become our problems. Marriage and relationships are a big burden for us sometimes when they're falling apart, when we're struggling. I mean, that's the most important thing in our life besides Jesus is our partner, is our marriage partner. And when that's in bad shape, that's a huge burden to carry. The responsibilities of just this life is another burden that many of you are carrying. And you're thinking probably right now, a list of things that you've got to get done. This whole stay-at-home thing has been difficult for a lot of people because you can't go to work, but you still got to work from home. And that's a whole new thing for you. And you're not sure if you're doing the right thing. And you're not sure if you're getting the things done that you need to get done. You're not sure how to do things. So all these responsibilities are piling on. And then a lot of you too have experienced the burden of disappointments. Do you have things in life that haven't just turned out the way that you want? We learn a lot in Proverbs about what disappointments do to us. They just cause this kind of constant ache in our heart. When expectations are left unmet, when things don't turn out the way that we want them to or had dreamed they always would. And those disappointments then do nothing but just simply add to the weight on our shoulders. Now again, I'm going to ask you, what can you add to the list? Some of you have been writing a few things down. I want you to put some more down on that chat box. You know the stuff that I'm talking about. Stuff that keeps you up at night. That constant nag in the back of your head. The junk that makes you feel like you're not good enough, like you're a failure, like you're disappointed in yourself, or you're just disappointed in life, period. The worries that you can't control. Those are the self-imposed burdens that most of us deal with. Now, there's a third burden that we have to talk about. It's one that we've all had. It's one that we all have. And this one, we got to own. It's our own fault. I have no one else to blame, nor do you. I can't pass this off to a teacher who taught me wrong. It's of our own doing, each one of us. And very simply, you probably know what I'm talking about, is the burden of sin. Now, the Bible is clear that we have all sinned, right? Romans 3:23 says that. No one lives a sin-free life, and sin is what separates us from God. Sin is fun and maybe even exciting for a little while, But then eventually what sin does is it robs us of our joy and our excitement, and it breeds two very dreadful words. You ready? Guilt and shame. That's what sin eventually does. It brings guilt and shame. And a lot of us spend a good portion of our lifetime trying to pretend that those don't exist. We try to overcome them, we try to hide them, but deep inside, sin produces guilt and shame. And that, my friends, is the worst burden of all. Now we can try to lighten the load, like I said, by pretending that it's not there, but it's impossible. It's kind of like being in prison. You owe some money, okay? And you're thrown into prison because you owe this enormous amount of money. And you say you are not getting out of prison until you pay it back. And by the way, no one can pay it for you. You have to pay it yourself. There's nothing you can do in prison to earn money, and they've stripped you from everything that you have. So you have no money. And interest is building every day. So what's that mean? That means you're hopeless. That's what sin does. It makes us feel hopeless. Have you ever felt that? You know, way back when God created man, he knew that in order to give us free will and choice, which I'm sure we're all glad that we have, he would have to rescue us from our bad choices. Because he knew that that free will would eventually lead to a bad choice. That's what sin is. And God had a plan all along. And that plan was Jesus. He was to be our Savior, our rescuer from this burden. And so here he is. He's this backwoods rabbi who didn't go to all the right schools, this itinerant teacher who didn't care much for religion and social norms, this radical mentor who did just the opposite of his contemporaries. What he did was he tried to take the complex and make it easy to understand with things like parables, stories, and real-life examples. This man of compassion, to the point of tears, by the way, when he saw the unnecessary burdens people were carrying, said these words. I want you to listen. Are you listening? He said this: "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." I want you to just let that sink in for a second. A rabbi of his day would never advertise this way. Gentle and lowly in heart? Rest? Easy and light? Are you kidding? These guys would laugh at Jesus and say, You missed the point. The point is to make it so hard that all they feel is what? Those two words, guilt and shame, for being able to not make it. And you know what? There is an enemy that is still at work trying to make you live by and be motivated by those two emotions, guilt and shame. And you know what Jesus said? Jesus said, no way. No. That's why he got so angry at those guys. And that should make us mad too. Now, if I could tell you anything today, this is what I would tell you, is that Jesus offers you nothing less than freedom from those unnecessary burdens. Freedom from those unnecessary burdens. Okay, let's get real with this. I want to make some application to this here today. And so what I have here is an actual wooden yoke. Let me show it to you, okay? I borrowed it from a fellow pastor here in town. His name is John Cerrero, and he's over at Springs Journey Church. And I want this to represent, because that's the word that Jesus used, our yoke and the two consequences of our unnecessary burdens, guilt and shame. And so the burdens may just kind of be also some of the normal burdens of life, like Corey and Joe illustrated for us last week with the mattress and the backpacks. It's like carrying those all around by yourself. Or it may be like religious people who have tried to burden me and you with their twisted view of God. Or I may have some of those self-imposed burdens. Or I just may have never gotten rid of the burden of sin. But the burden is heavy, and it's awkward, and it's not sustainable. As a matter of fact, I'm going to set this down for a second, and I'm going to pick this up. These are two letters here. This stands for guilt, and this stands for shame. The consequence of whatever burden it is that we're carrying if we don't get help from Jesus. And then if I add to that the yoke, and put this on there, I kind of feel like David, who at one point in Psalm 38:4 said, "My guilt overwhelms me. It's a burden too heavy to bear." And I could walk around with this yoke, and it's kind of awkward, and it's kind of heavy, and my neck hurts already. Or I could get some help.
Hey, hold on a second.
All right.
Let me grab this for you, help you out a little bit. All right, I'm sure that's it.
Thank you, Joe.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That feels a lot better. Let's go over this way. I want to tell you that trying to carry, and I actually tried when I was practicing this, tried to carry this thing around by myself, and I just about dropped it several times, and it did hurt my neck. It's pretty easy with two people, isn't it, Joe?
it is, yeah. It's still not light.
It's not light, but it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
But here comes Jesus, and he makes this invitation to bring this offer of assistance and help to us, and to carry his yoke, his teaching, his way of doing things. But it's not an invitation to a system, to works, to rules, or to lists. It's not an invitation to a religion or a tradition. His invitation is to a person. It's to Jesus. He says, "Come to me." Let's go ahead and take this off now and set it down. Thanks, Joe, for helping.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. It's kind of like, we're lost in the woods and we can't find our way out, like my wife Dawn was. And we hear the voice of someone, and then we see them, and all we can say is, "I knew you'd come." When I try to carry that yoke myself alone, it's very difficult. It's burdensome. And I wouldn't be able to do it very long. But when Jesus offers to first rid me of all the burdens that I'm not meant to carry, and especially that guilt and that shame, and then he says, "I'll help bear the part of life's burdens that are just too heavy for you," man, I am so free. And when I accept the message that Jesus offers me nothing less than freedom from unnecessary burdens, wow. You see, when Jesus offers his yoke, and remember a rabbi's yoke was his way of understanding the law, his perspective of God. Jesus doesn't do it with a 6-week course in theology and several signed documents. There's no quiz. You know how Jesus starts that and initiates that? He just simply says this: "Follow me." That's it. That's how he called all his disciples to take his yoke. He just simply said, "Follow me." And that's how he is still calling you. Yes, you standing there, sitting there, whatever it is, with this ridiculous yoke around your neck. You may have a yoke of perfection, the yoke of mistakes, the yoke of failures, the yoke of abuse and pain, the yoke of pretending or posing, the yoke of forgetfulness, the yoke of physical hurt, mental hurt, emotional hurt, the yoke of addiction, the yoke of you fill in the blanks. Do I need to go on? Now listen to this in 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 6 and 7. He says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, and casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you." See, once you realize that these burdens you're carrying are too heavy, you have to let go and accept this offer. Now, most of you are already Christians, but you still are carrying unnecessary burdens. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to just go ahead with me, whether you're sitting there or standing there, take your hands and put them palms up. And I just want you to stare at the palms of your hand for a second and envision the unique burdens that you are carrying. If you need to name them, go ahead. Now I want you to take your hands and lift them higher, just as a symbol of giving them to Jesus. Go ahead. He wants to take them. He says, I want you to give them to me. Cast them on me. Don't carry that yoke by yourself. He's saying, why are you trying to carry them? Why do you let guilt and shame creep back into your life? Why do you keep putting them around your neck? Why? Why? Give them to me, he says. I hope you can do that today. If you did not do it with me just now, please, before the day is over, spend some time naming those burdens. Whether you feel like somebody else has put them on you, you've imposed them yourself, or whether they're just life's normal burdens, and give them over to Jesus. It's the only way to freedom, folks. Some of you are watching and listening today, and you have never formally given your life over to Jesus. You see, your burden of sin is still hanging around your neck, and it's time that you realize it's too heavy, isn't it? It's interesting because when Jesus said those words that the Pharisees wouldn't lift a finger to help anyone carry their burdens, what did he do? He wasn't just talking. Jesus did more than that. Jesus gave his life to carry that yoke for us. He knew that you and I could not carry the burden of sin, and so he carried it for us. But that meant he had to be abused, he had to be beaten, he had to be whipped, he had to be hung on a cross, and it meant his death. That's, I'd say, a bit more than lifting a finger. And so I got to ask you again, aren't you done trying to carry that on your own? Jesus just asked that you accept that fact. You can't do it alone. And then he just simply says, his invitation is, follow me, come to me. And I know what some of you are thinking. What if he goes someplace I don't want to go? What if he's too hard to follow? What if? Remember, it's not about the rules and the regulations. It's just say, follow me. And when it does get tough, and it will, well, I'm there to carry the yoke with you. So you can put all those what ifs out of your mind. Get them even out of your heart. Take that step of faith, that step of trust. Because the promise is that you will find rest for your souls. You won't have that anxiety. You won't have that burden that's so unbearable. As a matter of fact, the burdens that you carry will be easy and light. Another way of saying that is they will be custom made for you. Is life going to be difficult? Yes. But it's kind of like putting in a good hard day's work and enjoying your work. You see, I'm not convinced that there's going to be no work in heaven. I think there will be work in heaven. I just think it'll be satisfactory. It'll be fulfilling. It'll be filled with joy. It'll be filled with an easiness and a lightness that Jesus offers. And if you don't have that easy, light feeling to your soul, you got burdens you don't need to be carrying. And forgiveness of the burden of your sin is at stake here. It's his offer of grace and mercy. You can't earn it or you can't achieve it. You can only receive it. There's a place for you to ask for help on this. And we ask that you go ahead and click that and decide that you want some help to follow Jesus. You just want to come to him. And if you've made that decision to follow Jesus, we certainly want to talk to you about it. And what this journey is all about of following him, what it looks like from the very beginning with things like your baptism. We want to explain that to you. Make sure you understand that. To prayer or just talking with God, how to do that. To learning more about following Jesus and the Jesus that we follow in the Bible. And then walking with Jesus on a daily basis. This is the most important thing you'll ever do, is get rid of the burden of sin. And if you already are following Jesus, the most important thing you can do is get rid of unnecessary burdens that you don't need to be carrying so that you can experience real freedom. Because that's what Jesus offers you, nothing less than freedom from your unnecessary burdens. My goodness, it is my hope and my prayer, my honest, heartfelt prayer, that today you make that decision. Jesus wants nothing less for you than freedom from your unnecessary burdens. Don't you want that too? God bless.